Good afternoon, boys and girls, mommies and daddies, and grandmommies and grandpappies. Today is a little bit later start, but it's been a wonderful day. I started out with a checkup at my wonderful doctor. She is amazing. I thoroughly enjoy her as a friend and as a doctor. And I lost 1 whole pound. I don't know where it went to. Turn around and I'll look and I'll know I'll find it. But 1 pound is not gaining. Then had a new friend call and wanted to talk, and we talked about all the current events and things that we had done in our past, and that was fun. And then, out of the blue, a dear old friend called, and I had to explain to her that I had to wait a minute. I would call her right back, that I was on the phone. And so we hung up the first conversation, and I called her. And not only did I get a chance to talk to her, but another older friend even came before she came. And so it's been fun. It's been a fun day. And so I'm sorry that I'm late, but you know what it is. Well, as you saw by the title, guess what? The title, Old Friends. Now, I wonder how I came up with that. Well, the old friends in question to Piggly, Wiggly, and Squiggly is, are you ready for this? Is the cook and the butler from Princess Hannah's castle. You see, when the boys and girls and their mamas and daddies and Farmer Brown and Mrs. Farmer Brown all went in December to see Hannah, Princess Hannah, they got to know some of the people that worked for the Queen. And all the ladies just loved the cook because she shared some of her special recipes with all the ladies from the woods. And she says, now don't tell anybody where you got these recipes at. It's a secret. Because some of these recipes was, 100 years old, So, of course, when Mommy Piggy told Squiggly and Wiggly and Piggly, you know what those stinking boys said? They such cut-ups. Squiggly says, Mama, are you going to have us eat 100-year-old food? He knew that they weren't going to eat 100-year-old food. And she said, oh, boys, she said, just for that, I should make you eat 100-year-old food, but I don't know where to find any at. Well, anyway, so the butler came. Butler and the cook were married, so of course he came. But the guys all liked the butler because he was nice enough to show them some good fishing places, and so he told them, what stores were good in town when they wanted to surprise their wives with a present and everything. And so the cook and the butler were real popular with all the people from the woods. Well, they had a vacation coming up, and they decided that they were going to go to the United States, and they were going to go to Florida, and they were going to get off the airplane at Tampa. And the only person who knew this, you know who, Mr. Farmer Brown. So he came and he picked him up, and nobody knew anything. Now, remember that big building that Farmer Brown was building, and it looked like a hotel? Well, he decided that while there was no hurricanes or anything else that the people needed to be out of their house, that he would basically turn it into a hotel. Anybody that needed, anybody that had friends visiting them, and if they didn't have room in their house, they could come and stay in his hotel. So he gave Mrs. Cook and Mr. Butler, he gave them the best room that he had. Well, Mrs. Farmer Brown, since they didn't have the kitchen working yet, Mrs. Farmer Brown was going to feed them at her house. And it worked out real good. And so the next day, the butler says, now, you drive on the right-hand side of the road over here, and we drive on the left-hand side. And Mr. Farmer Brown smiled, and he says, yes. He says, do you want me to play butler for you? I'll play chauffeur for you. And the butler kind of smiled, and he says, yeah, maybe you better do that for a couple of days. He said, because we want to go and see everybody that came over at Christmas time. Well, of course, the first thing that they saw was naturally Mr. Farmer Brown and Mrs. Farmer Brown. And then the next thing they wanted to go was they wanted to go see Piggly, Wiggly, and Squiggly. Oh, my goodness gracious. Well, now, nobody knew, okay? Nobody knew that they were in town. Nobody knew that they were in the woods going to be visited. Well, they knocked on the door, and Mrs. Piggy came to the door, and she saw Mr. Farmer Brown sitting out in the car. And he was reading a book. But she looked like that, and as soon as she opened up the door, she says, well, Barbara, the cook, and Robert, the butler, how are you doing? My goodness gracious. Well, the boys jumped up and ran to the door because they were hunting. They were trying to see if Princess Hannah was there. Well, of course, Princess Hannah couldn't come. But she's going to come later on this year, probably around Christmas time. And so, well, the Queen Mother, she will come too. Well, they had such a good time talking about last Christmas and what they had done and what they were doing. And everybody just had a great time. And, of course, Mrs. Piggy, she fixed supper for them. And so she told Mr. Farmer Brown, she said, you just go on back to the house. She said, I will bring Miss Barbara and Mr. Robert back to your house. She says, I will bring them back. And so they all said, okay, that'd be a good idea. So Mr. Farmer Brown drank his tea. That was in the afternoon. He drank his tea, and he says, okay, guys, he says, I'm going now. He says, and I'll see you when you get home. And with that, he left. And they just had such a great time talking. Well, it was just so much fun. And so they said, now, don't you tell anybody that we're here. We want to surprise everybody. And so Mrs. Piggy says, oh, she said, that's going to be good. She says, now, boys, don't you tell any of your friends that Miss Barbara and Mr. Robert are here. She said, don't you tell anybody. Okay, Mama, we promise we won't. We won't. We cross our hearts. We won't tell anybody. So Mrs. Piggy says, where are you going to go tomorrow? And Mrs. Barbara, the cook, said, well, we understand that Little Bad Wolf has been adopted by Mr. and Mrs. Farmer Brown. Is that right? That's wonderful. And Mrs. Piggy said, yes, it is wonderful. But you can see him any night or any day when he's out of school, or any night before you leave. She said, so where are you going to go next? And so Miss Barbara and Mr. Robert said, I think we need to go and see Allie the alligator. And Mrs. Piggy says, well, she said, that doesn't take too much of a place to drive. She said, I'll just take you over there. And she says, if you want, she says, you can spend the night here. And Miss Barbara and Mr. Robert says, no, that's awful sweet. That's very nice of you. But he says, we've got the room over to Mr. Farmer Brown's, and that's where our clothes are, and we need to get, we want to go back and sleep over there. He says, Mr. Farmer Brown said he would be our chauffeur for us. And Mrs. Piggy smiled, and she says, well, he knows where everybody is, that's for sure. So they left it with that. Well, she fixed a great big supper. Oh, my goodness gracious. She pulled out all the stops. I mean, she had made a chocolate cake for dessert. She'd made a blueberry pie for dessert. She made a rack of ribs. Oh, my goodness gracious. And she made them in the oven. She didn't even take them out to the grill. She made them in the oven. They were very, very good. I think she did like what GrandMommy used to do, and she put some pepper and some onions in there, and that was good. She liked that. She had corn on the cob. She had green beans. She had a salad. That woman went all out. Well, they had a real nice supper. And she let the boys stay up an extra half hour. At 8:30, she said, okay, boys, she says, it's time for you to go to bed. Well, they didn't want to, but Miss Barbara and Mr. Robert said, now you boys go on ahead. You go to bed like good boys. He says, we've got to be going ourselves. He said, Miss Piggy, you going to drive us home, or do you want us to call Mr. Farmer Brown? She says, nope. She says, I'll tell you what we'll do. She said, I'll let the boys stay up because it's not that far of a drive. We can still talk a few minutes, and then we'll drop you off at your house. And then, boys, and she looked at Piggy, Wiggly, and Squiggly. She says, now, boys, you will go to bed as soon as you get home, right? Yes, ma'am, we promise. And so with that, they all got in the car, and she drives over to Mr. Farmer Brown's hotel and let him out. And Mrs. Farmer Brown was there. She was doing something to one of the other rooms, and so she heard him come in, and so she came down, and she said, oh, she said, I'm so glad you're back. She said, I just put clean sheets in your room and clean towels. She said, excuse me. She says, I hope you have a wonderful night here. She says, who are you going to go see tomorrow? And they told her that they were going to go see Miss Alice the alligator and Allie. And she said, oh, she says, that'll be really good. She says, that's going to be fun. She says, they often talk about how much fun we had when we went over to see Princess Hannah and her mother. She said, that'll be so much fun. So, Mrs. Piggy had already left, and she was home by now. And she says, okay, boys, you know what you promised. And they said, yes, ma'am, we're going to go to bed. And they went right upstairs and took a real quick shower, and off to bed they went. Well, Mommy Piggy, she'd done all that cooking, so she cleaned up the kitchen, and she said, whew, she says, I'm one tired little piggy tonight. She says, I think I just might go to bed early myself. And the kitchen was all nice and clean, and the table was all shiny, and the dishes were in the dishwasher all nice and clean. She says, okay, she says, I'm going to go to bed. And with that, she goes upstairs, and she went to bed. And boys and girls, GrandMommy is tired, and I might go to bed too. But I got one thing to do first, and then I'm going to go to bed myself. Okay? GrandMommy likes naps in the afternoon. And especially, it's kind of rainy outside today. I don't know where you're at, but in Temple Terrace, it's kind of rainy. So what better time to go to bed during the rain? Tippy-tappy, tippy-tappy. All right. GrandMommy will see you Wednesday, and we will see what is cooking for the boys and girls. And that's all. Now, oh, don't forget. Comment, share, like. Okay? Can y'all do that? Comment, share, like, 2 buttons to push, and a couple buttons down here to comment. Okay? All right. Bye-bye. See ya.